Amira stood by the kitchen sink, her hands buried in a mountain of dishes, scrubbing furiously as if the effort could drown out the tension in the air. Somewhere in the living room, the muffled sounds of cartoons filled the silence between her and Fahad, who sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone. They had stopped talking about the little things, how the day went, funny moments with the kids, and now only spoke when they absolutely had to. The air between them felt colder than the November wind outside. Marriage, Amira thought bitterly, was supposed to be a partnership. She had imagined shared laughs over silly things, a united front against life's challenges. But this was a battle, one where the two of them fought, not side by side, but against each other. The financial stress wasn't helping. Fahad's small IT business was struggling to stay afloat, and her part-time teaching job barely covered groceries. It wasn't just the money, it was the never-ending cycle of arguments. "Why didn't you pay the water bill on time?" she snapped last week, the frustration boiling over. "I told you I didn't have the money, Amira," he shot back, his voice sharp. "Do you think I like this? That I'm sitting on a pile of cash just for fun?" The argument spiraled, like they always did, leaving both feeling raw and unheard. And like always, it ended in stony silence, with both retreating to their corners, licking their wounds. The mention of divorce had come up once, 2 weeks ago. It was brief, tossed out in a heated moment, but the weight of that word lingered. Divorce. Amira hated herself for even thinking about it. They had kids, 2 little ones, who needed stability, love, and a home that wasn't fractured by their parents' struggles. Yet some days, it felt like staying together for the kids was the only glue holding them together. The thing was, it hadn't always been this way. There was a time when their love felt like the strongest shield against the world. Amira remembered the early days when they prayed together, building dreams around their shared faith. Back then, their connection to Allah had felt like the foundation of their relationship. It gave them strength during their first year of marriage when Fahad lost his father and money was tight. But now, that foundation felt as distant as the stars. Salah had slipped to the wayside, replaced by late nights scrolling through social media or endless Netflix binges to numb their exhaustion. Duas were whispered in desperation, like empty words muttered to the wind. Faith had become something abstract, something they acknowledged but didn't really practice anymore. "I can't do this anymore, Fahad," Amira said one night, sitting at the edge of their bed. Her voice was barely above a whisper, thick with emotion. "I feel like we're just surviving, not living." Fahad didn't respond right away. He stared at the ceiling, his jaw tight. Finally, he said, "You think I don't feel the same way? Every day feels like a fight, Amira. A fight I don't know how to win." For the first time in months, their frustration melted into something else, something closer to vulnerability. "Then why are we still here?" she asked, tears welling in her eyes. "Because we have to be," Fahad said, his voice softer now. "Because we owe it to our kids to at least try." That night, after the lights were off and the house was quiet, Amira found herself wide awake, staring into the darkness. She thought about her children, how her 6-year-old, Ibrahim, always prayed for mommy and daddy to be happy again during bedtime du'as. She thought about her youngest, Liana, whose little giggles were like sunlight in their stormy lives. And then she thought about Allah. When was the last time she had truly turned to Him? Not just out of desperation, but with her heart wide open. She couldn't remember. In the stillness, a question nagged at her. Had they drifted so far from Allah that they'd lost their way completely? Or was there still hope to find their way back? Not just to Him, but to each other? The days blurred together like a monotone painting, gray, lifeless, and heavy. Amira woke up to the same routine every day. Get the kids ready for school, head to her part-time job, and then come home to the constant hum of stress. Conversations with Fahad were short, sometimes clipped, and filled with undertones of resentment. Bills piled up faster than they could pay them. A notice for their overdue rent arrived in the mail that morning, its cold, bold letters sitting like a stone on the kitchen counter. Fahad left it there without a word, as if ignoring it would make it disappear. That evening, they argued again. "I told you we need to talk to the landlord," Amira said, her voice sharp with frustration. "We can't just keep pushing this off." "And what exactly am I supposed to tell him, Amira?" Fahad snapped, his tone laced with defensiveness. "That money grows on trees, and we'll pluck some tomorrow? You're the one who said starting your business was the answer to everything," she fired back. "You promised things would get better." Fahad's face hardened. "Do you think I don't feel like a failure already? I'm trying, Amira. What more do you want from me?" The argument fizzled out, both too exhausted to continue. Fahad grabbed his jacket and walked out without saying where he was going. Amira stayed behind, wiping tears off her face with the sleeve of her sweater, her chest aching with the weight of hopelessness. That night, after putting the kids to bed, Amira scrolled through her phone, aimlessly hopping between apps. She came across a picture of herself and Fahad from their wedding day. They looked so young, so full of hope and joy. Back then, their shared faith had been their anchor. They prayed together, leaned on Allah when things got hard, and always found comfort in the promise that patience and gratitude would carry them through. Now faith felt like an afterthought, something they had both quietly set aside in their rush to keep up with the chaos of life. Prayers were rushed or missed entirely. Conversations about Allah or their deen had disappeared, replaced by endless discussions about expenses, deadlines, and the stress of raising kids. She closed her eyes and whispered a quiet prayer. "Ya Allah, guide us. Help us find a way through this." It felt empty, almost robotic, but it was the only thing she could muster. Meanwhile, Fahad sat in his car outside a 24-hour coffee shop, staring blankly at the steering wheel. He couldn't bring himself to go back home yet. The thought of facing Amira again, of seeing the disappointment in her eyes, felt unbearable. He thought about the man he used to be, the one who woke up for Fajr every morning, even when it was hard, the one who made dua before every major decision, trusting that Allah would guide him to what was best. But now, that version of himself felt like a stranger. He pulled out his phone and opened his banking app. The balance was lower than he expected. Anxiety clawed at his chest. How did it get this bad? For a fleeting moment, he thought about giving up on the business, on their marriage, on everything. But then an image of his kids flashed in his mind. Ibrahim showing off his latest drawing. Liana giggling as she chased her older brother around the living room. They were the only bright spots in an otherwise overwhelming life. "I can't fail them," he muttered under his breath. The cracks in their relationship deepened over the next few weeks. Arguments became more frequent, the air in their home thick with tension. Even the kids started to notice. "Why do you and Baba fight so much?" Ibrahim asked one evening, his innocent question cutting through Amira like a knife. "We're just, stressed, sweetie," she replied, forcing a smile. "But we love you very much." Ibrahim frowned, clearly unconvinced, and returned to his drawing. Later that night, Amira and Fahad sat in separate corners of the living room, both lost in their own thoughts. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional sound of a car passing outside. For Amira, the loneliness felt unbearable. For Fahad, the weight of failure pressed down on him like a suffocating blanket. Both wondered the same thing. How did we get here? One Sunday morning, while tidying the living room, Amira stumbled upon one of Ibrahim's school assignments. It was a "What I Love About My Family" worksheet, filled with the innocent, heartfelt words of a 6-year-old. "I love how Mama makes yummy food. I love how Baba takes me to the park. I love when we pray together at night." The last sentence stopped her cold. Pray together? They hadn't done that in months, maybe even a year. She showed the paper to Fahad that evening. "Do you remember when we used to pray together as a family?" she asked, her voice trembling. Fahad looked at the paper, his face softening for the first time in weeks. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I do." It was a small moment, but it planted a seed, a faint glimmer of something they hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It started small, almost imperceptibly. One evening, after tucking the kids into bed, Amira found herself sitting on the prayer mat she hadn't unfolded in months. The faint smell of dust from the fabric mixed with the soft glow of the bedside lamp. She hesitated, unsure of what to say or where to begin. For a moment, she just sat there, her mind racing with everything that had gone wrong in their lives. The unpaid bills, the endless arguments, the disconnection that felt like a gaping chasm between her and Fahad. Slowly, she raised her hands. "Ya Allah," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't even know how to ask anymore. Please, just help us." The words were simple, but for the first time in a long time, they felt real. The next morning, Fahad noticed the prayer mat still out as he shuffled into the bedroom to grab his phone charger. He paused, staring at it for a moment before shaking his head and walking away. What difference does it make? He thought bitterly, but something about the sight of it lingered in his mind throughout the day. Later that evening, as Amira was putting the kids to sleep, Fahad found himself sitting on the edge of the bed, his fingers idly scrolling through his phone. Without thinking, he opened a random Islamic lecture on YouTube. The voice of the scholar filled the room. No matter how far you feel from Allah, He is always near. You just have to turn back. Even one step toward Him can change everything. Fahad felt a lump rise in his throat. It had been so long since he had allowed himself to think about Allah, about faith, about what truly mattered. Maybe this is the step I need to take, he thought. That Friday, Fahad surprised Amira by suggesting they go to Juma together as a family. Amira looked up from her coffee, startled. You want to take the kids to the masjid? She asked, her tone cautious. Yeah, Fahad said, avoiding her gaze. I just thought, I don't know, it might be nice. Amira hesitated. Their arguments had left her wary of these sudden gestures, but she decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. All right, she said softly. The khutbah that day was about hardship and patience. The imam spoke about how trials are a test from Allah, designed to purify the heart and bring people closer to Him. As Fahad listened, he felt the words cut through the layers of frustration and bitterness that had built up inside him. Amira, sitting a few rows behind him in the women's section, felt something similar. For the first time in what felt like forever, the noise in her head quieted. After the prayer, as they walked to the car, their son Ibrahim asked, Baba, can we do this every Friday? Fahad glanced at Amira, their eyes meeting briefly. Inshallah, we'll try, he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. The days that followed were far from perfect. Old habits and arguments still reared their heads, but there were also small, meaningful changes. Fahad began waking up for Fajr, at first sporadically, then more consistently. Amira started carving out a few minutes each day to read Quran, something she hadn't done in years. One evening, Amira walked into the living room to find Fahad teaching Ibrahim how to recite Surah Al-Fatiha. The sight made her heart ache, not with sadness, but with something closer to longing. Maybe there's still hope for us, she thought. They began praying together occasionally, often with the kids. These moments felt clumsy and awkward at first, like trying to reconnect with an old friend after years apart. But slowly, they began to feel natural, comforting even. Their faith wasn't the only thing that began to change. As they turned back to Allah, they found themselves viewing their challenges in a different light. Do you ever think, Fahad said one evening, that maybe this is all a test? Like maybe Allah is trying to teach us something through all this? Amira nodded, stirring sugar into her tea. I think about that a lot, especially when I see the kids. No matter how hard things get, they always find reasons to laugh. Maybe we've been focusing on the wrong things. Fahad leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Maybe it's time we start focusing on what really matters. It wasn't an overnight transformation. There were still tough days when the weight of their struggles felt overwhelming, but there was a growing sense of hope, like they were finally moving in the right direction. One night, as they sat together after praying Isha, Fahad looked at Amira and said, I know we've got a long way to go, but thank you for not giving up on us. Amira's eyes filled with tears. I could say the same to you, she said with a small, shaky smile. In that moment, for the first time in what felt like years, they both felt like they were on the same team again. The transformation wasn't sudden or dramatic. It came in tiny steps, baby ones, really, like the way a seed grows into a tree. At first, there were awkward moments, Fahad fumbling over his Quran recitation during prayer, or Amira hesitating before suggesting they read a hadith together after dinner. But those moments were sacred, even in their clumsiness. Slowly, prayer became a routine, not just a rushed task to check off, but a moment they both looked forward to. Amira started setting the alarm for Fajr, and while there were mornings Fahad groaned and buried himself in the blankets, he eventually dragged himself out of bed to join her. Some mornings, they prayed with the kids. Ibrahim loved leading the dua, his innocent voice carrying words of sincerity that made both parents smile. Their relationship began to shift in ways neither of them had expected. Do you remember when we used to make duas for each other? Amira asked one evening as they sat on the couch, sipping tea after putting the kids to bed. Fahad blinked, caught off guard. Yeah, he said, his tone softening. Back when life was simpler. It's not simpler now, Amira said, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. But maybe we need to start doing it again. That night, for the first time in years, Fahad made a dua for Amira, asking Allah to bless her, give her strength, and ease her burdens. Amira did the same for for Fahad, her voice trembling as she asked Allah to guide him and grant him success in his work. It was a small act, but it felt monumental, like the first rain after a long, parched drought. Their finances, too, began to show signs of improvement. It wasn't a miracle or a windfall, just small, steady progress. Fahad landed a new client for his IT business, and Amira found an opportunity to tutor students on weekends for extra income. They started budgeting more carefully, cutting back on unnecessary expenses, and making do with what they had. Who knew I'd be good at meal planning? Amira joked one evening as she packed leftovers for Fahad's lunch. Who knew I'd actually eat leftovers? Fahad replied with a grin. It was a light-hearted moment, but it marked a shift in their dynamic. The tension that had once hung over every interaction was beginning to fade, replaced by laughter and a sense of partnership. One weekend, they decided to take the kids to the park, a simple outing, but one they hadn't made time for in months. As Fahad pushed Liana on the swing, her giggles echoing in the crisp autumn air, Amira watched from a nearby bench, a warm feeling blooming in her chest. He's smiling again, she thought, her heart swelling with gratitude. That evening, after the kids were asleep, Fahad turned to Amira. You know, he said, his voice quiet, I don't think I've told you this in a long time, but thank you for everything, for sticking with me when I didn't deserve it. Amira's eyes widened, caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. I could say the same to you, she said after a moment. We both had our moments, Fahad, but I think we're learning how to do this the right way now. Their shared faith became a cornerstone of their renewed connection. They started attending Islamic lectures together on Sunday mornings, leaving the kids with Amira's sister for a couple of hours. These moments became a refuge for both of them, a chance to reconnect with their deen and each other. One lecture, in particular, stayed with them. The Imam spoke about the concept of barakah, the blessings that come from putting Allah at the center of your life. It's not about how much you have, the Imam said. It's about how much Allah blesses what you have. A little with Allah is better than a lot without Him. That line resonated deeply with both of them. Their home, once filled with tension and silence, began to feel like a sanctuary again. The kids noticed the change, too. You and Baba don't fight anymore, Ibrahim said one evening, looking up from his drawing. We're trying, sweetheart, Amira said, ruffling his hair, and we're going to keep trying. There were still hard days, moments of stress, disagreements, and setbacks, but those moments no longer felt like the end of the world. They were learning to navigate them together with patience and trust in Allah. One evening, as they prayed Isha together, Fahad glanced at Amira, her face illuminated by the soft light of the prayer mat. He felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for her, but for the journey they had taken to get here. We're going to be okay, he said quietly after the prayer. Amira smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. Inshallah, she replied. The house was alive with warmth and light in a way it hadn't been in years. The evening sun poured through the windows, casting a golden glow over the living room as Ibrahim and Liana giggled over a board game on the carpet. Amira hummed softly as she prepared dinner, the smell of freshly baked bread wafting through the air. In the corner of the room, Fahad sat at the dining table, pen in hand, sketching out plans for a new project. His business, while not wildly successful, had grown steadily. There was still a long way to go, but for the first time, he felt confident, grounded. Dinner's ready, Amira called, placing the steaming dishes on the table. The family gathered around, laughter spilling into the air as Ibrahim tried to sneak a piece of bread before the meal began. Fahad playfully swatted his hand away. Not so fast, little man. Let's make dua first. As they raised their hands in unison, Amira felt a lump rise in her throat. It had become a nightly ritual, one that reminded her how far they had come. She glanced at Fahad as he led the dua, his voice steady and full of conviction. This is what we were missing, she thought. This is what brought us back. After dinner, the family settled in the living room. Liana curled up next to Amira with a picture book, while Ibrahim built a tower with his toy blocks. Fahad leaned back on the couch, his arm draped around Amira's shoulders. You know, he said softly, it's crazy to think about where we were a year ago. I didn't think we'd make it. Amira looked up at him, her expression thoughtful. Neither did I, she admitted, but Allah has a way of showing us what we're capable of when we trust Him. Fahad nodded, his gaze distant for a moment. It's like we forgot what really mattered. I was so caught up in trying to fix everything myself, I didn't stop to think that maybe I needed to ask for help from Allah, from you. Amira smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. I think we both needed to learn that lesson, but I'm glad we did. Alhamdulillah. Their family had changed in ways that went beyond their improved finances or however, rekindled love. There was a sense of peace in their home, a deep gratitude for the small moments that once seemed insignificant. Amira started a family gratitude journal, where each member wrote one thing they were thankful for every night. Ibrahim's entries were often about ice cream or his favorite cartoons, while Liana's were a mix of scribbles and tiny stick figures. Fahad's were thoughtful and reflective, thankful for my family, grateful for another chance. Amira's entries were often the same, grateful to Allah for bringing us back to each other. One Friday, after Juma, Fahad and Amira sat on a bench outside the masjid, watching their kids run around in the courtyard. The sun was warm on their faces, and the sound of children's laughter filled the air. "Do you think it's possible to completely start over?" Fahad asked suddenly. Amira turned to him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, to leave the past behind, to stop carrying all the guilt, the mistakes, the arguments." Amira considered this for a moment. "I think we don't have to start over," she said finally. "We just need to keep going, one step at a time. The past brought us here, Fahad. It's part of the journey, but it doesn't have to define the future." Fahad nodded, her words settling into his heart. That evening, as the kids fell asleep and the house grew quiet, Fahad and Amira prayed Isha together. After the prayer, they sat side by side on the prayer mats, their hands raised in dua. Fahad spoke first, his voice steady but emotional. "Ya Allah, thank you for giving us another chance. Thank you for bringing us back to you, to each other. Please guide us to stay on this path, to keep our hearts close to you." Amira's voice joined his, soft but resolute. "Ya Allah, bless our family, protect our children, and let us grow together in faith and love. Let our home always be a place of peace, where your name is remembered." As they lowered their hands, Fahad reached over and took Amira's in his. For a moment, they simply sat there, the silence filled with gratitude and understanding. They both knew that life would continue to bring its share of challenges, but now they had something they hadn't before. A foundation rooted in faith, a partnership built on love and trust, and a shared commitment to walking this journey together with Allah at the center. And that, they both realized, was more than enough. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the transformative power of faith, we invite you to embark on your own Quranic journey. Subscribe to our channel for inspiring stories, reflections, and practical tips on how to reconnect with Allah and strengthen your relationships through the teachings of the Quran and Sunnah. Together, let's rediscover the beauty of faith, one step at a time. Don't forget to like, share, and comment below. Your thoughts and experiences could inspire someone else on their journey. Let's build a community rooted in hope, love, and connection. Subscribe now and join us on this beautiful path.